turn around to have a conversation, somebody other is talking about cryptocurrencies. It's as if crypto mania has overtaken so many parts of this country, where everyone just wants to talk about if you've put in money, and if you have, where have you, what's the kind of returns that you got, is it safe, is it not safe, whether we should invest, whether we should not invest, should it be Bitcoin, should it be one of the new ones that you're looking at, what are NFTs? It's an endless conversation, but pretty much I'm sure in the last couple of weeks itself, you've ended up hearing about this somewhere or the other. That's the extent of interest, and of course, many looking to do these transactions and investments into cryptocurrencies. And amid this growing interest for cryptocurrencies, the Reserve Bank of India's governor once again raised the concern over cryptocurrency. Now, while he did say, and I must highlight that he doesn't think that the numbers that are doing the rounds in terms of 6 lakh crore invested into cryptocurrencies just in our country, he doesn't think that the numbers are really reflective of the reality and sound a bit exaggerated. Nevertheless, even if they're not this high and much lower, it is still a threat to our financial stability and the macro economy, especially in the light of the fact that we don't have a regulatory framework for these virtual currencies. He raised the issue that the virtual currency is completely unregulated in India, and from the point of view of financial stability, it is a cause of concern. Now, like I said, nobody really knows. There isn't any officially confirmed, credible data on what's the extent of the crypto market as far as Indians are concerned, how much of money and how many people have put their money in this. There are certain reports that suggest perhaps up to $10 billion, and that over 10 crore Indians have invested in cryptocurrencies. Whether these numbers are a little more or less, we don't know, but in any given way, it does look as if India is one of the largest markets already, with most crypto owners in terms of people globally, ahead of US, UK, and China. China, by the way, has just moved and completely blocked this system. In our country, it's been a kind of an up and down in terms of a regulatory environment. Few years ago, when Bitcoins was the biggest thing that everybody was talking about, and the crypto exchanges had just begun to crop up, in the light of that, the Reserve Bank of India had actually banned the banks in dealing with crypto businesses. This is what the Reserve Bank of India had done. It had come as a big blow to many of these businesses. But the Supreme Court had quashed this order of the Reserve Bank of India banning crypto in August 2021. What happened in August 2021? The Supreme Court order came much earlier. The government gave an update to the parliament about what is the plan for a regulatory framework, because the Supreme Court didn't really pass a ruling on whether it's completely legal or not, or what has to be done. That, of course, is for the government and the parliament to decide. And the government is working on a set of legislations. They said that they're considering panel recommendations that have been submitted to them. Then comes this RBI's latest warning that has emerged. Another red flag. Of course, many have been raised in the past as well by the Reserve Bank of India. And now we are given to understand that on November 15th, there will be a big meeting with the crypto stakeholders, the government, even the Parliamentary Standing Committee members who will actually host this meeting. And there are reports that are suggesting that the government is actually considering fast-tracking the bill. They were initially planning to bring it during the budget session. They may actually look at, if possible, fast-tracking it and bringing the cryptocurrency bill in the winter session of Parliament itself. The government also obviously cognizant of the fact that there is an urgent need to regulate crypto. And that's what we're going to talk about. Of course, you need a regulatory environment. How practical is it? What are the things we should look at? And you, as a person who's already invested in cryptocurrencies or are interested in doing so, should be wary of. And how quickly should the government move towards it? Are we already a little too late considering the amount of interest and the scale of transactions that are already taking place in our country? I say good evening to to Mr. Subhash Garg, former Department of Economic Affairs Secretary, head of the Inter-Ministerial Committee on Virtual Currencies, joining me this evening. Sharat Chandra, blockchain and emerging tech expert. Mr. Tamal Bandyopadhyay, author and columnist. Raghav Gupta, e-commerce director for the Rug Republic and crypto expert. Mohan Vishwa of the BJP. I actually want to go across to Mr. Tamal Bandyopadhyay to get more insights as to what is it that Shaktikanta Das and the Reserve Bank of India repeatedly keeps pointing towards?
RBI has been continuously pointing towards its distinct discomfort with cryptocurrency. As you know, Mr. Garg knows this better. He was chairing, if I'm not mistaken, the Inter-Ministerial Committee, where RBI representative, former Deputy Governor Mr. Kanungo was there, and there are people from other regulators as well. And this committee was not in favor of allowing crypto. And primary concern is this, how do you define it? It is neither a commodity nor an asset, and nor it could be part of, or nor is it a part of the payment system. So it's nothing but gambling, and people are making money at this point of time. People may lose money also later. Now, what do you do with it? It was supposed to be, this Inter-Ministerial Committee report was supposed to be placed and discussed in Parliament during the budget session, but it has not been done. And since then, the Supreme Court judgment came. Supreme Court judgment is not a grim signal for crypto, but it did say that RBI can't ban, the banks cannot be banned. RBI released that thing that following the Supreme Court judgment, the banks need to be careful, etc. It was initially misinterpreted as if RBI is allowing it. RBI did not allowing it. RBI did not allow it. RBI left it to the banks. It is the onus on the banks to make sure that things are on the right track, not happening. Now, there is one part of it, is this: the RBI is not uncomfortable. In fact, it is welcoming the underlying technology of crypto, that is blockchain. It says we are welcoming blockchain, and blockchain can be used for many other purposes. Everybody knows, because it's an anonymous ledger, that concept, etc. And it's fine with blockchain. But RBI perception about crypto is it's nothing but a gambling. And I'm repeating, how do we define it, and then how do you regulate it? Because it is neither an asset, nor a commodity, nor a part of payment system. It's a pure play gambling. Now, have we allowed gambling in India? No, it's banned. So similarly, RBI has not used the word banned, but I think it meant it. And the last point is this thing, which you actually rightly said so. Whatever the government needs to do, I think it has to be done fast, because with every day number of investors in crypto, it is highly exaggerated. That's what governor said. That was sort of on a fireside chat with me. That's what he discussed 2 days back. So his perception is this number: 10 crore people are investors and 6 trillion investment is highly exaggerated. That's what he said. But whatever it may, I am familiar with people who have never invested in stock market. Even now, they're not investing in stock market. But if you look at their mobile, there's a crypto app, and some money they are putting it in crypto. And it has been growing. It has been growing. Incidentally, in Indonesia, the number of investors in crypto is higher. It has overtaken equity investors. And the pace at which it is going in India, we may face the same thing. If you remember, in 2018, a couple of executives of a crypto exchange at that point of time were briefly in a police custody because they are putting up an ATM for crypto transactions at a mall in Bangalore. But since then, the last 3 years, there's been a dramatic change. Everywhere there is a crypto. So you need to take a call faster.
Yes.
Otherwise, we can face lot of problems, lot of difficulties.
Because by the day, and just to give a sense to those who may still not be very well aware, and some of the experts who are on the panel with me will help me explain that to our viewers. But if you're not, it's growing so fast that it's even difficult to keep up with the headline news. Every day there is a new concept. Every day there is a new virtual currency that's zooming up, or coming down, new trend that's come through, to even keep up with that. And I can imagine that even for anybody who's looking at setting up a regulatory framework, it's not going to be easy. But it must be done for this very reason, because it's bringing in a lot of people. Mr. Tamal Bandyopadhyay, you said, it was in conversation with you where Shaktikanta Das mentioned these points. He also highlighted that though a lot of people who are putting in money are putting in smaller sums of money as of now, below 3,000 rupees as a token amount. Yet, if it is a concern for RBI, we need to seriously look at it. Mr. Subhash Garg, thank you for joining us. I think from the time that the panel had submitted its recommendations, also so much more has happened, and perhaps the government will also have to take a very different view. But why was the panel so not in favor of allowing this kind of a setup in our country?
See, the cryptocurrencies is something of a product, which I think Tamal was also mentioning very clearly, that we don't understand this. What this is it a currency? Is it a commodity? Is it a service platform? Is it a asset? What is it? In fact, this is an absolutely new kind of product which has come into the public domain. It is all these things rolled into one. The currency, the asset, the services you can provide, platforms you can create, applications you can do. And therefore, since you don't know the nature of it very well, there is so much of uncertainty, so much of enthusiasm looking at the promise that this technology, this new phenomenon will probably generate enormous amount of wealth in times to come. And therefore we should join, but they don't know, no one is very clear what exactly the kind of services it will provide. So when this committee was considering this subject, it was focused on the narrower issue of the currency. Bitcoin was started as a currency to replace the fiat currency of the central banks. And the currency, we were very clear that as far as the currency is concerned, there cannot be a good public policy to allow privately mined or created currencies. That is not going to work either from the monetary policy framework or the financial stability, or even for simple transactions to take place. And therefore, the committee took a view, which is number one, that as far as the currency is concerned, it should be banned. It should be made very clear that as currency, this will not be allowed to function in India. Mm-hmm. But considering the promise of this technology, the financial system should embrace the crypto and the blockchain technology and create financial services. And the last thing which the committee actually said, which I think is the most important thing going forward, is that the government and the Reserve Bank together should come up with a new digital currency, because digital currency is a far more versatile and useful way of being a currency. And if the government can bring out that currency, the mania around the cryptocurrencies for the currency part will be simply taken away.
Okay, so essentially, and I remember this was also part of the conversation when the Reserve Bank of India took its first step back in 2018, that it looks at its own version of Bitcoin. How much of this the government now includes, we need to see. But obviously, they will need to have fresh round of conversations with the stakeholders today. And that's what they're going to do now next week. Mr. Sharat Chandra, let's start off with you. Various aspects which are there. What is it that the government needs to look at urgently in terms of defining a framework?
I think we should definitely look at, or the government should definitely look at, some of the parallels from other regions, let's say Singapore for that matter, how they are regulating cryptocurrencies. They have 2 or 3 levels where we have Payment Services Act, then you have Act for Services and Securities, right? So let's say, for example, of stable coins, that's where payment regulations can be tweaked and modified so that stable coin issuers can be treated as something like payment banks, what we have in India. And then same rules with respect to wallet and KYC can be applied. so that there's some sense of semblance as far as the current banking and financial system is concerned. Now, when it comes to securities, that's where a lot of deliberation has to happen. How do you define a token, and what are some of the basic requirements or minimum disclosure requirements for tokenization? Let's say if I want to tokenize a piece of real estate, right? How do I do it? How will that be recognized, right? So in terms of fractional ownership of shares or real world assets, there's some clear guidelines which needs to come forward from either SEBI or the Ministry of Finance itself, because this will not fall under the domain of RBI. This will entirely fall into the purview of SEBI. How do you define, what are some of the challenges, or what is your approach of tokenization if I'm trying to tokenize a real world asset, like land for that matter?
Yes. Let's then break it down, like you said. And one aspect of it is, what are you looking at defining and regulating? For example, Raghav, for some, what the government looked at and the panel looked at initially was whether you can recognize it as a currency, as a legal currency that people can use. The other aspect will be whether you can recognize it just as a token, or and then how do you define that token? With newer and newer formats coming in, it just gets a lot more complicated. And the third is, can it be just allowed as a form of investment or trade, where on exchanges people are just putting in money, just like they did in stocks, and getting some returns out of it? What is your view on what the government needs to look at first?
So I think first things first, we should separate like not everything is a cryptocurrency, right? There's two parts to it: cryptocurrencies and utility token. So let's say Bitcoin is a currency because that is the purpose it aims to fulfill. That could definitely be an asset. In fact, the US does have something called the Harvey test, which defines what is a security. I'm sure SEBI has its own guidelines, and with these new technologies, we'll come up with guidelines. The thing I very much agree about is they should do it soon. But I think it would be wrong to just try to make one definition for everything. For example, Ethereum is not a currency. Ethereum is a platform to make new apps, to deliver new services, to deliver new products. So therefore, putting Bitcoin and Ethereum under the same umbrella of regulatory purview would be a big mistake, in my opinion.
Okay, so you're saying that first, to begin with, the government needs to acknowledge that it can be identified as an asset, as it is in several other countries?
Yes. So some of them can be assets, some of them can be commodities. That is what the main point is here. They're not all the same. They're really not the same. Because let's say even the things like Dogecoin, they don't solve a purpose except fast, cheap transactions, right?
Correct.
They are just speculative plays. I agree with that. So therefore, those can very much be assets. But then there are Ethereum, Solana, Cardano. These are things that enable other technologies. They enable three things, right? They enable better supply chains, better transactions, and better proof of ownership. So I think the effort, as long as the effort is done from a point of view of making the most of the technology rather than just trying to get some rules in ASAP, I think we'll come up with some very interesting stuff. I'm sure of it.
Okay, before I go across to the BJP on this and get in Mr. Mohan Vishwa's view also on it, one other aspect, Sharad Chandra, is that right now, if you speak to most of the players and the stakeholders, their answer to, oh yes, we are trying to safeguard the interest of the investors by doing simple user verification or a KYC that's done at a bank level. But is that a good enough answer when you talk about investor protection? Yeah, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think there's no standardization with respect to KYC, right? So there's no way of looking at how one exchange is doing vis-a-vis the other, right? So they might be doing a half a KYC, right? Or not the complete KYC of a user. So in absence of clear guidelines, even user onboarding or following AML guidelines, anti-money laundering guidelines, right? So it's a complete Wild West, how these exchanges are working and how, what are some of the onboarding procedures of these exchanges are, right? Because some of the exchanges they have fallen on the wrong side of the law as well. So It's not enough. It's not enough.
Yeah, it's not enough. Absolutely. And to me, I would say that should be one of the first things that either the government or the market regulator or the Reserve Bank of India, wherever the owners then finally lies basis the categorization of this entire segment, will have to look at protection of people's money and their interests. If there are unsuspecting large number of people in our country today who are choosing to put their hard-earned money, Mohan Vishwa, into any of these virtual currencies rather than putting it in the bank or even in blue chip stocks, then at some point the responsibility will come on the government to say, how do we safeguard your interest?
See, Tanvi, first of all, I would like to say that for the benefit of the users, like how our Subhash was mentioning, cryptocurrency or Bitcoin is not a coin or a currency which I will keep it in my purse. Rather, I'll use it as a legal tender in the market, like, dollar in US, where you can use it for your daily exchange purpose, or rupees in India, or rather yen in Japan. Okay, so it's not a currency altogether. If it is a currency, obviously it will be regulated by the central bank of the respective country. Crypto or Bitcoin is an asset. It's a transaction between the two people. One is the buyer and the seller, where it happens through a crypto exchange, where it has gained momentum from past 9 to 10 years across the globe, where US has recognized it as a legal transaction. Then European countries have also recognized. Then Japan also have recognized. Whereas in India, when we didn't have much of clarity in 2018. So the RBI came up with a circular stating that, it cannot be used in financial transactions and all. But later Supreme Court gave a judgment that, you should not, you should not involve in everything, and you should bring some sort of regulation to control, or rather have a fair trade in the cryptocurrency. So after that, the basic KYC norms, and also the subject to the money laundering laws, money laundering restrictions, or FCRA restrictions. So banks and other exchanges have been allowed to deal in the cryptocurrencies. So these are the basic things which we have done. And today's technology world, every day things changes, new assets gets created, new investment opportunity gets created. Like the cryptocurrency is also gaining momentum across the world. So when we make a law in India to regulate the cryptocurrency, obviously it should be on par with the international practices, like the similar regulation which is there in US, similar regulation which is there in UK or Europe and Japan. It should be on par with that. Mm-hmm. So our government is also working very hard on
Mr. Vishwa, we started off this process, and the government was well aware of this, and so ideally, started off the process, we can say, from 2018, when we were looking at what to do with Bitcoins. And today we are talking about a scenario where every day there is some new version of NFT that is being traded with use of these cryptocurrencies. There are so many of these crypto exchanges that have cropped up. Everywhere you look, all around us, these are the guys with big amount of money advertising, convincing people to put in their money. Conversations across all platforms are about putting in money into cryptocurrencies. At what point the government feels, will they step in with some kind of a framework?
See, that's what the framework work is already under process. It's not that we're going to start from tomorrow or day after tomorrow. Like, as I said, it should be along with or on par with international practices, where we have signed also, at the WTO level or some other agreement level. So the regulations are still in process. We already made some basic regulations to regulate them through KYC norms or through anti-money laundering laws. And also there were some instances where, there were news where terror funding also was happening through Bitcoin. So keeping all those things into mind, the basic regulations have already been rolled out, subject to the KYC of both the buyer and the seller. And also when there is a trade happens between a buyer and seller on peer-to-peer basis, the clear regulation has been given that unless the seller gets the money to his bank account, there will not be any transfer of Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency to the buyer. So these kind of basic regulations are already in place. So further, depending on or going at the way the investors are getting into crypto, so any further regulations and all, the government and the RBI, or at the same time SEBI is also looking into.
Because you've said this, let me go back to Mr. Garg. Mr. Garg, would you now say that perhaps the government needs to redefine, what an expert committee needs to look into from what your panel had seen, or what your panel's target was and recommendations were? Or do you think that essentially what you've looked into, already researched on, recommended, still holds complete value today?
So let us be clear about some of those developments which have taken place, and what do they mean. Number one, the Supreme Court judgment was to the fact that since there is no law in the country which makes the cryptocurrency or any aspect of cryptocurrencies as illegal, the Reserve Bank has no business to disallow the banking system to deal with the cryptocurrency. So it was absence of a framework which the Supreme Court used, that until this happens, this is a legitimate business, right? So that is one thing. So it is not that Supreme Court said that you will regulate or you do it, this is you will allow. That's not what the Supreme Court said. Supreme Court said it is currently not disallowed, currently not illegal. That's one thing. Second, no one in the country at this moment, no regulatory authority, whether it's Reserve Bank or SEBI or anyone, does anything relating to cryptocurrencies. There is no such regulation. The regulation which the crypto communities is doing, the crypto exchanges are doing, is within the definition of what we call self-regulation. That they have on their own decided that we'll do some KYC and ALMFT kind of thing, basically to screen that no terrorist or other kind of money launderers come and do trading on our exchanges. It's not specified. The day the ED or the ED says that you become an account reporting authority under the Money Laundering Act, on that day, the exchanges are required to sort of report their transactions, and then the system will sort of recognize that whether there is any anti-money laundering activity is taking or not. So the public authorities today don't sort of deal with or do anything with the cryptocurrency. Now, this is the situation which the government is facing. So you have one product which you don't fully understand, and there is a complete regulatory vacuum. There is a lot of concern about the protection of people. You also highlighted that tomorrow, if there is a fall, crash, what happens to the people? Today, the government owes no duty to anyone who is investing. Now, keeping this in mind, I think what they need to do is, in my judgment, two main things. Number one, for the currency aspect, as I said earlier, bring out the official currency and disallow the currency aspect of the crypto. The other one is more important. Now you have this is the age of digitalization. Everything is getting digitalized, right? And the crypto and blockchain technology is an extremely important technology for digitalization. This can do everything which is happening elsewhere and plus something more, using its smart contract and other kind of technologies. Now, technologies does not normally require to be regulated by the government. That is not what it is. But the effect of technology in terms of its contracts, in terms of its asset and those things. So I think we should either bring a kind of Cryptocurrencies Contract Regulations Act or some to that effect, like we brought out the Securities Contract Act to deal with all aspects of contracting, doing business on that, and also dealing with the asset aspect of it. Either we do that, or we sort of amend every other thing. For example, on crypto platforms, you can do insurance, you can do decentralized financing and all. So the regulators which deal with insurance or decentralized or financing, etc., they regulate that particular aspect, even done on the crypto platforms. So I think these are the options. I don't know what the government is currently thinking. No draft or no paper has been put out.
Right.
This hearing, which is starting with the Standing Committee on 15th, is expected to sort of basically hear what the stakeholders think about it. But I don't think this is going to bring any kind of clarity regarding what kind of regulation.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's maybe not, but perhaps the government needs to also hear what the stakeholders have to say about it as well as they go about this. And if indeed as many news reports now suggest that the government is looking at fast-tracking this and not maybe waiting until the budget session, then there is really no time to design that bill. Looks highly unlikely at this point of time to me, honestly speaking. But Raghav, do you want to weigh in on what Mr. Garg is saying as to what the approach should be for the government? Do they need to get into those minute details, or should they simply look at identifying categories and maybe licensing the players?
I think it's absolutely essential they get into the minutest of details, because this is really something world-changing we have on our hands. Like Mr. Garg mentioned, decentralized finance. Decentralized finance could change the world, the way the poor people of the world get money. It could really be something very special. So the government needs to be very sort of open-minded towards it. I think as long as that is there, as long as, while obviously protecting the investor, which is why, for example, I tried making an account on one of the Indian exchanges. It takes my Aadhaar, it takes my proof of identity documents. That's a good first step, because at least now you have a very clear record of who came on, right? And secondly, what most people don't realize is blockchain is a lot more transparent than the current financial system. For example, if the government now knows that I made an account, they can easily know, okay, this address to this address, this address, this address. It's way easier to track money on the blockchain once you know someone's address than it is in our current financial system. So I think as long as the panel that the government forms is well versed with the technologies, understands the absolute potential of these, looks at international examples like Mr. Vishwa said, what New York is doing now, what Miami did, America in general, El Salvador, I think they will come up with good stuff, as long as the idea is to leverage the technology whilst protecting the investor and not just one of the two things.
Yes, not just one of the two things, but keeping in mind the track record of our government and Reserve Bank of India, perhaps the interest of the investor first and then the industry itself. But Mr. Bandyopadhyay, would you think it will be prudent for the Reserve Bank to completely take a backseat on this and leave the responsibility to the government to look at it?
Tanvi, I'm afraid you will not be happy to tell when I am saying this. I think we are just adding to confusion, because people are investing not in blockchain. The people who are investing, they're investing in crypto. They are seeing their money growing. Blockchain is the underlying technology, and Reserve Bank of India said blockchain is welcome. You can use blockchain for multiple purposes. Why only financial sector? Yes, this entire ledger-based thing, the transaction and the anonymity, it can be expanded using even for our land holding in rural India. Everything else can be used through blockchain. So that's a completely different thing. If you are welcoming blockchain, that does not mean you are welcoming crypto. I think I heard Raghav saying this and Mr. Garg also saying this. I think both of them are talking about welcoming blockchain. This is Reserve Bank of India also saying that let's welcome blockchain. We are not nothing. There's no problem at all. So that's point number one. Point number two is this. I heard one of us was saying that everybody else legalized. Nobody has legalized except for El Salvador. That's the only country globally that has legalized crypto as a legal tender, as a part of the payment system. Yes, US is positive, and it's only in the derivative market is trading. Canada also, etc., etc. But not a single country except for El Salvador has legalized this as a legal tender.
Yes.
So that's the only country legal tender. But rest everything, like Russia has not banned, but almost coming to ban. China has banned it. Vietnam has something else. Canada, Australia has different status, etc., etc. But no country it has been accepted as a legal tender. That's point number two. I'm just making the clarity. And point number three is this. RBI, the central bank digital currency and cryptocurrency, they are completely two different things. Central bank digital currency is nothing but an app. It's nothing like we have right now, various things, various apps. It's just an app. We will get rid of the currency. We'll have it on our mobile as and when that's a legal tender. The problem is where the money will be kept. Will it be with the Reserve Bank of India, or will it be with the banks? In that case, if it's with the Reserve Bank of India, how do I get the interest? Those are the issues and all. But Reserve Bank of India or the central bank digital currency is no substitute of crypto. It is not a competing currency at all. Yeah. That's just the part of a payment system. We will not invest in it, and we will not make money out of it.
Okay.
So
yes. No, you're absolutely right. I 100% agree with you, and I think it's also. I don't know if the governments will have a change of heart, but to me, it seems highly unlikely the government is going to start recognizing them as legal tender either, or legal currency either. No government would want to have to give that control to a private entity when it comes to a currency in the country. So that being said, it brings back to the same point that I've been asking here, Sharat Chandra. What are the parts that the government needs to look at to regulate, to ensure that there is some kind of an regulatory oversight as to what's going on? And I'm simply saying it from a, investor, common person's point of view. So many crores of people now are putting their money into this. There needs to be some regulatory oversight.
Right. And we can begin by, let's say, ring fencing some entities, come with a licensing framework so that you identify, okay, these are the people who are allowed to function as exchanges. They need to report to ED or reporting authorities as far as money laundering and other aspects are concerned. And then gradually also create an awareness about investor protection, because a lot of signups are coming from tier 2 and tier 3 cities where there's not enough literacy about what this new technology is all about. And they have thousands of coins in circulation, right? So people who from these tier 2 and tier 3 cities, they're very gullible, vulnerable, and they might end up losing money. So two things I would say: create a licensing framework, a ring fence entities who can participate and who can register as licensed exchanges, and then create rules of investor protection, investor awareness.
Do we need a separate crypto regulator? Would that work, Sharat?
I would still go with an independent regulator, something like IFSC.
Yeah.
That will work fine, and there will not be any regulatory overlap between the SEBI
because like the point that came up here right now, Raghav, was is it going to be the Reserve Bank of India, or is it closer to what SEBI is doing as far as market regulation is concerned, or should it just be an entity which just looks at these virtual cryptocurrencies and focuses purely on that?
So I think just one quick thing. First thing first, I want to understand that Bitcoin is not a privately controlled entity. In fact, it's way, way less privately controlled than Indian rupee or US dollar. It is an extremely decentralized thing. That is why a central bank digital currency is not even on the same plane, like Mr. Bandyopadhyay said. The only thing the central bank should be doing, I would imagine, would I be okay with in terms of is knowing who came on, right? So as long as you have a solid KYC process in which you know, okay, these are exactly the people of the country who have on this, and then you can track their money anyway. I do not think the problem is solved or the technology is leveraged with a centrally controlled, because blockchain and cryptocurrencies by definition are decentralized. So that is important to understand. Other than that, yes, I do agree that there should be an independent body, because it is very, very important to understand the tech. I do not think the same people who are the savants of the equity world are the savants of the crypto world, because crypto is a lot more technical. So I would imagine having a good independent third body, which there obviously works with RBI, because it would be wrong to say that there's no FEMA problem here, there's no AML problem here. Obviously there is, but which is why you need RBI to control that part of the macroeconomy, whereas still leaving the interpretation and the leveraging of all the tech to an independent body suited for this job.
That being said, then it comes back to the regulation that has to be decided in the framework created. Mohan, it's not an easy job, and I'm just going to say that, is the government open to hearing from people who understand the system better? It's a new age system. It's a new age technology. It's a new age trend beyond the technology on what is being done with this technology across the world, and every day it changes. Not so easy for any regulator or a government agency to actually understand it.
Yeah, definitely, Tanvi. The 18th circular of RBI was very clear what was our intention, either from the government side or from the RBI side. So keeping that in mind, obviously there will be a tough regulations which will be brought in by the government to protect the interest of the investor. It's that if the trade happens between a two buyer and a seller in a legal manner, I don't think so. We should have any worry. To say that or to call that as a legal trade, we should have some sort of a regulation. Rather, I don't have 100% of what's happening inside. Even we are also expecting a bill proposed to be tabled in the parliament in the winter session, where looking at the way the crypto is growing every day by day. So keeping that in mind, our intention earlier was also very clear. So we are there to protect the interest of the investor in a legal way, after taking into consideration of the anti-money laundering activities, the funding for terrorism activities, those kind of things into account. So the government is very well aware of this fact, and it is going to bring a tough regulations to have a fair trade in cryptocurrency.
Well, off late, all the signals that we've got and the reporters that's also emerged seems to suggest that the government is going to take some kind of a middle ground, really. We need to wait and watch. I would not, speculate at this point of time unless we have more clarity on what the government is planning to do. Big thank you to all of the panelists who have joined me on this conversation. For me, one thing is very simple, and why I thought and I believed I wanted to do this conversation here on Prime Time is because there are far too many people now getting swayed in this new trend, with this new trend. What Bitcoin perhaps did many years ago is now happening, but with 100 times the intensity and the scale. And so many more people are either putting their money in or thinking of putting their money in with absolutely no regulatory oversight, no legal safety net provided to them at this point. Like some of our panelists said, in a sense, yes, it could be called gambling. Most countries across the world haven't even managed to define cryptocurrencies. Are they an asset that you can buy and sell and own? And if it is, when you make money out of it, do you pay tax on it? Certain countries have a view on that. Is it a currency? Can you use this as a currency to buy other things and to sell other things? In that sense, yes, that's already happening. And these are being used as currencies to then trade in the digital world, in the virtual world, for several other tokens, for several other NFTs that are being made. It's an endless world already that exists, and people in our country now are getting sucked into it. And the government is falling way behind in terms of planning a legal framework around it. So I really hope when on November 15th, the meeting that is being hosted by the parliamentary committee members with the stakeholders of the crypto world, the government and the parliament members listen and understand and find some good experts to tell them about what is going on and how they need to go about designing their law for it. Thank you for joining us.
Now, in fact, as far as cryptocurrencies go, we know over the last several months, in fact, there has been a huge surge in the people who are trading or buying cryptocurrencies as well. And the Reserve Bank of India even earlier had raised concerns and red flagged as far as, this increased crypto trading goes. And now, once again, the RBI governor has cited concerns both from a financial stability point of view and a macroeconomic point of view, also saying that, these issues and certain suggestions have been flagged off to the government and they are now looking into it. So sometime in the future, we can, soon enough possibly, we can expect some sort of rules, regulations really to come out to regulate this entire space at this point in time. The other part about the kind of money that is going in, the number of people who are buying and trading cryptos right now, as far as certain advertisements are concerned, numbers such as 6 lakh crore, etc. are floating around, but the RBI governor has said that that is highly exaggerated and people are, experimenting really, and very small amounts of maybe 1,000 to 3,000 rupees kind of numbers are actually being put in, in several individuals' cases. So the quantum, the RBI governor says, is not as much as what is being put out at this point in time.
Well, this is a special segment this Friday evening.